Make way for Mr. Speaker.
I invite Member for Fraser-Nicoll to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
I would like to start our work today with a reflection. As we begin our last week of the session, let us give thanks for our colleagues, for those who hope to continue and those that have made a decision to retire. Please know that your work in this House for the people of British Columbia has made a difference. I ask us all to remember why we chose to take on this work. We come to this place with good intentions, with a will to make a difference. And when we leave, we know our work will continue on, even though we are not here. Let us all enjoy this next week and be thankful for the privilege of serving. Thank you.
Introductions by members. Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills. Private members' time.
Member for Caribou-Chilcotin.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to bring attention to an issue which has for certain gone unaddressed in countless BC communities for far too long. It's no secret, Mr. Speaker, that our province is experiencing a healthcare crisis. We've all heard the healthcare horror stories, but here are the facts. Walk-in wait times are the worst in the country. They're getting worse every year, increasing from 41 minutes in 2019 to an alarming 93 minutes. And if you have to be or happen to be in rural British Columbia, we can achieve times of as much as 10 hours. Accessing specialist care has also become increasingly difficult, with the duration from referral to appointment growing from 12 weeks to 14. 1 in 5 British Columbians don't have a family doctor. Chronic understaffing persists. With Interior Health in my region reporting an increase in the vacancy rate from 5.1, Madam Speaker, to 13.7 in 2023. And yet there's no end in sight for these issues. 40% of BC's families' doctors are expected to retire in the next decade. BC also has the lowest ratio of undergraduate and postgraduate medical education seats in Canada, meaning that we are not training enough new doctors to replace the ones we're going to lose. But these issues are even more acute in rural communities where the voices of everyday realities of residents continue to be overlooked. As a representative of rural constituents, I understand the harsh realities faced by both patients and healthcare professionals in British Columbia. First, let's talk about service interruptions. Recent years have seen overnight ER closures in isolated and rural communities like Clearwater, Port Hardy, Port McNeill, Merritt, Oliver, Mackenzie, Prince Rupert, Kitimat, and so many, many more. Imagine showing up in need of an emergency attention only to hear that you will have to travel another hour or more to receive care, and then, of course, face those long waits in an ER. Think about that for a moment. Madam Speaker. It literally could be the difference between life and death. Interior Health has had 18 service interruptions so far in 2024 alone. Northern Health has experienced a shocking 68 service interruptions during the same period, and this number continues to climb. 68 times, Madam Speaker, that essential healthcare services were closed, and we aren't even halfway through the year yet. Prince Rupert, for example, has had recorded 13 service interruptions so far this year, including overnight closures for 5 consecutive days in March. Chetwynd has had 11 service interruptions and has had closure announcements every day for a week since May 4th. Caribou Memorial Hospital in my constituency had a sign posted outside their door in October of 2023 that read, "The emergency room is closed unless a patient is imminently dying." In the summer of 2023, nurses at the Bulkley Valley District Hospital were instructed to call 911 if their patients were in medical distress because of a lack of doctors to staff the ER. These service interruptions are a result of chronic understaffing and a failure to recruit and retain healthcare workers in rural communities. In rural BC, if even one physician calls in sick, it can result in a closure and the need to divert patients elsewhere. Healthcare workers are facing severe burnout. They desperately need more support and additional staff and better resources. There are also issues in recruitment of rural health professionals, given the lack of education and training programs within rural communities. Madam Speaker, in the Caribou region alone, there are 6,000 residents on the waiting list for family doctors, and thousands more who are waiting but haven't even been registered. Almost half of the residents in our region are currently left without a family doctor. Our communities are lacking the healthcare infrastructure and professionals necessary to provide adequate service, and yet nothing seems to be coming forth with clarity. In addition to staffing challenges, rural residents face issues surrounding healthcare-related transportation that people in urban centres simply do not face. The government's travel assistance program is inadequate, with most folks paying significant out-of-pocket expenses to travel to urban centres to access care. All while in some rural areas, ambulance wait times are up to 40 minutes, and we know that that has been much longer in Caribou-Chilcotin and other rural areas. In 2022, an infant died in Barrier waiting for an ambulance. In the same year, a man and woman in Ashcroft died from cardiac arrest while waiting for an ambulance. And, Madam Speaker, of course, in my riding, a 14-year-old lost his life due to cardiac arrest while waiting for an ambulance. It's unacceptable. These issues affect certain groups more than others. For example, rural seniors often bear the brunt of these harms, whether it's access to a family physician, 24 adult acute care hospital services, diagnostics and laboratory medical specialists, long-term care beds, home care, or ambulance services. Seniors in rural BC have less access than their urban counterparts. Rural BC has proportionately a larger, faster growing seniors population than urban BC, yet it has less infrastructure and resources to support the aging population. Madam Speaker, all of these facts that I've shared today paint a grim reality for rural British Columbians. Too often, we have ignored these issues that are facing rural residents. It is time to hear less empty words and increase spending to solve some of these healthcare issues in rural British Columbia. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Recognizing the member for North Coast.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member opposite for his remarks in regards to rural and remote healthcare, and generally touching on the health human resources challenge that we're facing in British Columbia, and not just in rural BC, but all of BC and all of Canada, around the world. In fact, we have the shortages that he's mentioned with various healthcare providers, not just family doctors, but nurse practitioners, nurses, the allied health professionals. And that's why we have a 70-point health human resources strategy to help address a lot of the shortages that we are facing. And I will acknowledge that we are particularly feeling in rural communities, as the member said, if you have one physician off or unavailable or ill, that can have a chain reaction in the services that are available in a small community. I would just like to just push back a little bit on the fact that the member concluded his remarks with the fact that we need to spend more money. It's a lack of investment in rural BC, and well, I feel like we could never spend enough money on the priorities that are important to us. We have spent a tremendous amount of money, and as I said, we are up against a world health human resources challenge. So it feels like perhaps it feels like the progress is too incremental or too slow, but it's not for the lack thereof. In fact, in the healthcare workers that he's speaking of, we have continuously invested into rural and remote recruitment incentives, such as housing for 3 months in some communities for a physician to come to assess the community if they want to set up shop and permanently serve that community. We also have free childcare. We've given them all sorts of financial incentive bonuses, signing bonuses, all training opportunities. And however, despite all those efforts, and in certain communities where it's particularly hard felt, in some of those rural communities, there are additional incentives provided by the health authorities. And we are still facing the challenge of successfully recruiting and retaining people. And in this day and age, I'd like to argue that it's actually not about money, or, as the member suggested, needing to invest more money. It's actually the fact that we have a wider demographic of healthcare providers that want more of a work-life balance. And so essentially, whenever one physician retires these days, we need to replace that physician with 1.5 physicians. And there simply are just not enough people in the world. But we are trying. We have all sorts of programs to try and recruit these healthcare providers to communities. The travel assistance program, we have invested $10 million into the BC Cancer Agency and for Hope Air to completely fund any sort of cancer treatment that anyone in British Columbia would need. So that would be their hotels, their flights, their taxis, their foods. We've actually invested in Hope Air. They have a philosophy of no one left behind. So there are programs and there are investments into the travel assistance program. Could we do more? There's always more to do. And as the Parliamentary Secretary for Rural Health, that is something that I care deeply and passionately about. And I've been working on. I have experienced these challenges as a rural resident myself. And as far as not having enough people or not training enough, well, we've opened 602 nursing seats, 322 new allied health related seats. We've increased midwifery seats. We're building the first new medical school in Western Canada in 50 years to help train more doctors around the province. We've added more undergraduate medical seats and more residency seats. We have a new agreement with doctors, bringing in more doctors with a different payment model. We've had successful agreements with the BCNU, the BC Nurses Union. We've hired 7,000 people into the new HCAP program, which is the Healthcare Assistance Program. We have laddering programs for nurses, for LPNs to become RNs, for healthcare aides to become nurses. There's a lot that we're doing.
Thank you, member. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, member.
Recognizing the member for Caribou-Chilcotin to close.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the comments made by the member opposite. Certainly, I would suggest that the investments that I was referring to are part of an equation that includes everything else that we just talked about, training and retention and all those different things. So I can appreciate that money is not all that we need here. There are many, many things that will solve this. But I will say this, Madam Speaker, results matter. And that is the result that we're seeing in Caribou-Chilcotin and for certain in rural BC are challenging, to say the least. I want to re-emphasize the deadly seriousness of the healthcare crisis that are faced by residents in rural BC. Throughout my statement, I deliberately avoided individual horror stories and stuck to the facts that I know them. Just a wealth of factual evidence and statistics to paint a bit of a picture for this government to understand what is happening in rural BC. I'd like to conclude my remarks today, but I'm going to remind us all that these facts are not just numbers. They represent real people, real consequences. Some of these people are my own constituents. Lee Butler, I've raised the issue in question period already this session and written to the minister twice about the now deceased constituent Lee, whose experience constitutes a horror story of severe neglect and deplorable conditions. Lee Butler was left to lie in a hospital bed with his feet and legs hanging over the rails of the bed to avoid laying in his own filth and soiled sheets. It's absolutely unacceptable. Or what about Hank Crinnan, a 90-year-old man from Williams Lake who sought care at Caribou Memorial Hospital? He suffered similar indignities of being left hours alone, covered by his own jacket, on a stretcher in a children's playroom. Or Wynne Perry, who we learned about last week, who suffered similar situations. These examples are amongst a litany of examples that the opposition has been raising for years in this legislature. How many more stories of neglect and deplorable conditions in hospitals throughout rural BC, like Lee or Hank or Wynne, do we need to hear before something changes, before the results change in this province? Madam Speaker, it is definitely time to take real action to help real people and to improve access and results in healthcare throughout the rural areas of this province. Rural British Columbians deserve so much better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. I just have to check here. Recognizing the member for Nanaimo, North Cowichan.
Yes, thank you, and excuse me, members. I seek leave to make an introduction.
Is leave granted?
Aye. Thank you. I'd like to welcome on behalf of the MLA for North Island the students from Phoenix Middle School and their teacher, Leah Wilson. We're very proud to have you in the House. We're having statements where members exchange ideas, and please enjoy your stay. I know your MLA would like to be here, but she's in a meeting. Thank you.
Recognizing the member for Vancouver West End.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, I rise today to speak about the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia. It is the Rainbow Week of Action, and that day is Friday, May 17th. And so I thought we'd get the week started off right. Now, I was a little bit nervous about approaching this statement, and I guess I think about the social media backlash I'm going to get of people calling me all sorts of names. I think about the people who will say, why do you talk about gay stuff so much? You should just be happy being yourself, don't flaunt it. I think about that internalized homophobia that I've taken on to say that I should hide myself, make myself invisible so that I don't get beaten up. And it's something that I learned in high school, Honourable Speaker. I've tried to unlearn it, and I've been working on it and been pretty good most days, but there are those days where you look at the phone or you deal with somebody shouting at you on the street, and you want to crawl into your shell a little bit. And I'm not used to being one to crawl into my shell, but I've done that more often than not. It feels like a little bit lately, and I want to come out again, because I think it's important that we show signs of strength, that we be visible. My mother would always say, the best way to teach lessons is to be a role model. The best way to learn is by looking at those around you and learning from them and how they live. So the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia is created to show that visibility, to say you don't have to hide from hatred. You don't have to. We need to unite together to stop the hatred and make people safe, make our communities safer. And in BC, we've been marking this day for, I don't know how long, but it's been growing. We've now been spreading this word around acceptance and community in communities all across this province. And I've got to say, it feels really good to be where we're at. However, I've got to say that it also feels really bad to look at those trying to tear down those freedoms, those trying to push people back into feelings of shame and invisibility. There are those in communities all across this province, Honourable Speaker. I don't post where I'm going to be with my mobile community office on the street in the West End anymore, because people will use that post to alert their friends so that they can come and shout at me. It was the worst when I became a new dad. I had people chasing me through the West End who would come in, not from the West End, simply to spread their homophobia. This is in this day and age, and I still get that today. So I don't post those things because I've been advised I will not be safe if people know where I am so they can come and target me. My office has been attacked by a man who was homophobic, assaulting my assistant and punching a hole in my door. So this is real. It's not a, why do you complain all the time? It's a, this is what people are going through in our streets. And I got it easy, Honourable Speaker. I got to say, in my position, most people don't want to mess with me. But young people in our schools, people in our communities, vulnerable people, don't have it so easy all the time. Now, my first recollection of the word gay, I got in trouble. I was in elementary school. I was in kindergarten. A neighbor had told me, a neighbor friend had said, well, why don't you guys go, me and my twin brother, go call those people over there gay. It's a funny word. And so we did, because one of the first days in school, and you do what your older neighbor tells you to do. And we thought, oh, this will be hilarious. Didn't turn out so much, because that kid was hurt. I don't think he knew what it meant either, but he was taught to know that it was a bad thing. We got called up. A teacher pulled us out, a teacher by the name of Mrs. Van Dyke, very wonderful woman. And she said, well, gay means happy, gay means joyous, but you still have to go to the principal's office. So we were left very confused. Well, why would, if we called somebody joyous and happy, would we get in trouble going to the principal's office? We didn't learn at the principal's office what it meant either. We just knew we should never say that word again, because it was not something you should call people. So I was early on in life already being told there was something you shouldn't talk about. It wasn't until, I guess it was grade 8, maybe grade 7, where I started to realize, okay, maybe I am a little different from what people say you should be. I tried my darndest to love Cindy Crawford and all the other models out there. And boy, I would show my friends the pictures. Oh, I've got a latest pin-up. Oh boy, my locker and the rest. I, for some reason, couldn't quite convince them. And that was pretty hard. You know, I think, like many who don't feel that they're part of a community because they've been made to feel other, you feel lonely and you feel invisible. You might think of suicide, as I did at one point. And it's horrible. It's not something anybody should ever face. So when I hear people go on about SOGI, which stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity policies in our schools, they don't have a clue what they're talking about. All we're saying is make kids safe in schools. If you got a group of kids that are getting punched 75% more of the time than another group of kids that aren't, you're going to bring specialized policies in to deal and support those kids who are being assaulted. You're not just going to go say, oh, everybody should be safe, but we're going to look over here while this group gets pummeled. But that's the education policy some people are promoting in this day and age. Let's go back to everybody's equal, except some are more equal than others, and some will get pummeled more than others. And so I say, SOGI policy in schools is nothing more than saying we're standing up for the human rights of all kids. Just like when we brought in anti-racism policies in our schools to make sure that kids weren't being targeted for their race or religion or disability. It's about standing up for the Human Rights Code. And I got to acknowledge my colleague for Peace River South, when he was Education Minister, for working to bring this policy into all schools in our province, because, boy, I beat on that door for a long time as an MLA, and we had students coming here pleading because they needed that support.
Thank you.
And I'll have more to say in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Recognizing West Vancouver Capilano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to really thank the member from Vancouver West End. I've always appreciated his thoughtful comments, and I think that standing and sharing a story that's personal in a position that he has as Deputy Speaker is important for young people to be able to see that and to really appreciate that that as a community we need to hold people up, and differences are fabulous. It's something that we must celebrate. I'll quote the famous poet E.E. Cummings. It takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. And you think about that and you think, well, maybe sometimes it shouldn't have to take that much courage. And we really need to, as the member got up and shared, we need to be aware of the kinds of things that happen in the community and the kind of hate that is shown towards people who should be loved and supported. May 17th is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. And I think when I was first elected 4 years ago, this was the first topic I spoke about when I stood in this House on a 2-minute statement. So today is probably the last time I stand in this House on a statement, so I think it's apt that we're bookending this. So it should be a worldwide celebration of sexual and gender diversities. It is celebrated in more than 130 countries, and even many of those that are still criminalizing LGBTQ community. This theme this year is No One Left Behind. Equality, freedom, and justice for all. Now, I was going to talk about how thankfully, Madam Speaker, this year actually feels a bit more positive than it has in previous years. But the member has reminded me that there's still so much that we have to do. Many places in the world have started to shift away from criminalizing LGBTQ+ peoples, and instead are beginning to codify and safeguard their rights. In 2019, 11 countries have legalized marriage equality, and since 2017, 13 countries have removed laws criminalizing LGBTQ+ sexuality. And I will say that when it happened in British Columbia, when it happened in Canada, I was very, very proud to be in a community, in a province, in a country that felt it was necessary to protect and support and recognize marriage between all people. Growing up is stressful, it's confusing at the best of times, and trying to figure out who you are and how you fit in is part of becoming who the person that you are. But imagine if you don't feel that, if you don't feel in a way, that you're in the right body, that you just don't feel like you can have the Cindy Crawford picture up in the locker and have the credibility of your buddies who you're showing it to. LGBTQ children are often isolated, anxious, and confused about why they feel the way they do. And sometimes there's parents and friends who are supportive and understand, but all too often they don't. And often with parents, it's not that they don't support their child, that they don't still love their child, but truly it is that they don't understand, and they want to keep their child from having the experiences that we know do happen. They want to keep them safe, and so it is important that we help parents understand how they can best love and support their children. Walk in the shoes of someone who's walked through their life being told that those around them and the images they're seeing, that gay, being bi, lesbian, or pan, being non-binary, gender non-conforming, or trans is being different, and that is being wrong. Hostility, discrimination against others who are different from us is often a reaction of ignorance. I'm going to just end with a quote because, as you know, I always run out of time here. I'll end with a quote from Barbara Giddings, and she was an early activist in the 60s and 70s for LGBTQ equality. And she says, "Equality means more than passing laws. The struggle is really won in the hearts and minds of the community where it really counts." So I think we all need to think that, put our arms around all those around us who we love, and thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Vancouver West End to close.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I thank the member for West Vancouver Capilano for her commitment to equality and for raising her voice, because again, we can't do this unless we're all doing this together. And I think that's where building bridges and solidarity amongst colleagues and friends and neighbors and so on is so important. So yes, I think we've come a long, long way. We now have policy in all our schools. But we should remember that that can go away in an instant. Governments can come, governments can go. We've seen groups organized to bang on the windows of schools and scare kids because of homophobia and transphobia. We've seen those groups target school board elections, target elected people, and it's real. They're out there and they're organizing. And so let's not pretend that that's not happening. Let's make sure that we all take that pledge to stand up for equality, to stand up for rainbow equality, to stand up for our communities, to say no to hate. We know there are places down south of us where saying the word gay in a school could get you in trouble, where saying the word trans in a school could get you in trouble, could get you fired if you were a teacher. I want to thank some people who've educated me a lot. My husband, first off, Romy Chandra Herbert now, he started the first Gay Straight Alliance in a BC school back in Maple Ridge in 1997, I believe. That meant that he'd got followed home from school. He had to get friends to get him home safely. That meant that that school became an unsafe place for him to be. But his call was also taken up by the BCTF, the Teachers Federation at the time, some school trustees. Slowly over time, more parents, more students, and others got on board. But as I say, that was in 1997, and it wasn't until really 2016 that we actually finally had every public school pledging to make it safer for kids who are lesbian, gay, bi, trans, intersex, questioning, two-spirit. I want to thank elders like Sempulian Gonzalez, who've educated me around two-spirit issues, Jim Diva, Janine Fuller, Julie Steins, Don Hand, Ted North, Tim Stevenson, who was here a deputy speaker in this place, Ellen Woodsworth, Murray and Peter Corrin, Pat Hogan. The list is so long of so many folks who, many will never know their names. Don't forget those first protests, you had to wear paper bags over your face, otherwise the media would expose who you were, so you'd lose your job and you could potentially lose your family or lose your loved ones. So it's a fight that has gone often without names, with just that broad support, building and helping each other, until people like me could stand up and be very visible and not have that same fear that so many earlier people had. So more to do, Honourable Speaker. I thank those raising their voices and looking after each other. Let's stand up for LGBTQ equality. Happy International Day against homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. Thank you,
member. Recognizing the member for Caribou North.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Today I rise to recognize the hard-working people in the natural resource sector. I want every person in our natural resource sector to know, on behalf of the official opposition, that we see your hard work. We are proud of your contributions. We are grateful for everything that you're doing, and we're going to fight for you. During the last 7 years under this government, the natural resource sector has been overlooked and neglected.
Member.
One glaring example of this.
Member, I'd remind you it's nonpartisan in this first hour.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, we have a mill closure in northern British Columbia. Canfor's statement on its closure is that government policies have caused massive uncertainty and made it unstable to invest here in the future. The official opposition stands with the 700 workers, their families, and their communities who have received this deeply upsetting news and now face an uncertain future. On top of the nearly 300 jobs that would have been part of the new mill in Houston, which is no longer proceeding. This also impacts our logging contractors, our small businesses, and our suppliers, and the list goes on and on. A new state-of-the-art sawmill in Houston that the government bragged about as citing Canfor's planned reinvestment in the mill as an important step forward, but clearly policies have failed to match the government's words, and now we see the project cancelled. These closures are a chilling signal of the broader trend where forestry investment is being forced out of British Columbia. The government is facilitating the collapse of an industry that has long been the backbone of our provincial economy and has supported BC families and workers for generations. The uncertainty created by a chaotic and ever-changing policy environment has destroyed investor confidence in British Columbia, and now workers are paying the price. Honourable Speaker, it will be the entire province paying the price, as shutting down mills that produce the lumber and plywood will drive up housing costs even more. My passion, Honourable Speaker, for community comes from my upbringing. Last Friday, May 10th, marked an important anniversary for my family. In 1933, my family moved to the Caribou to Moose Heights. On that day, they farmed, they built a school, started a post office, and later built a community hall. Our family has seen the slow demise of these communities. 17% of the population lived on a farm in 1950. Now it is less than 1%. Under the current government, that number is set to go even lower if this government implements its Clean BC plan. Clean BC's plan is projected to shrink BC's economy by $28 billion by 2030, additionally leading to the loss of 200,000 jobs, nearly $3 billion revenue loss. We are facing an affordable crisis and should prioritize growing jobs, not cutting them. British Columbians deserve better. We must take bold action to invest in clean power projects, transmission and electrification of British Columbia. We must expedite project reviews and permitting processes, cutting through red tape that delays permits, progress, and opportunity in the natural resource sector. We must stop carbon tax increases and market BC's economy as a low-carbon global leader to help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. BC is full of sustainability-produced LNG, critical minerals, and metals that can help transition our world in a clean future. This province has the potential to be a clean energy leader. The global demand for electricity and critical minerals is growing. We have the potential to extract these minerals in a responsible way to help meet the world's demand to keep clean energy sources going, and in the process, lower global emissions. I am proud of the workers in British Columbia who are already paving the way towards this promising future. Because of these individuals, BC has the safest mining practices and sets the highest environmental standards in the world. Please know your hard work does not go unnoticed. As the world transitions to a cleaner, more sustainable future, this government cannot continue to fall behind. Instead, we must tap into our potential and harness British Columbia's natural resources to fuel economic growth and generate employment in the natural resource sector. And to all of those tirelessly contributing to the natural resource sector, your hard work does not go unnoticed. From workers in mining, to agriculture, to natural gas, to forestry, to sawmills, and beyond, your work is appreciated. Honourable Speaker, in closing, I have had the privilege of growing up in a small rural community and have met so many incredible individuals who work tirelessly in the resource sector. It is difficult work. Our communities and our province should stand up and support these workers, not do everything in its power to make sure these communities are hollowed out, communities are abandoned, jobs are lost, and workers are left without paychecks to put food on their table.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Vernon-Monashee.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. May I seek the leave to make an introduction, please?
Members, is leave granted?
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, who does not love Girl Guide cookies? You can try all the decadent cookies from around the world, but nothing beats the taste of those delicious Girl Guide cookies, and most importantly, as we know, the money raised served the greater cause, which inspires us all. So today, I am absolutely thrilled that I get to welcome Girl Guides from our Monashee district, who I had the pleasure to meeting with them earlier. So I would like to make an introduction. So Girl Guides joining us in the gallery today are Holly, Piper, Talia, Zoe, Aria, Mereda, Kelly, Lucy, Emily, Lauren, Ginny, Joy, Bianca, Marine, Avillo, Charlotte, Anaya, Meiva, and Lakeland couldn't be with us. Volunteer guides joining them are Alex, Rena, Kaylee, Alicia, Krista, and of course, last but not the least, the amazing bus driver, Jared, who helped them to bring them here. And would the House please join me to make them feel very welcomed and thank them, and they're the future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Pell River, Sunshine Coast.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'm just asked the House to give me leave to make an introduction, a short introduction.
Thank you. You've heard. Is leave granted?
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'd just like to welcome students from Phoenix Middle School, the second group who are here. Unfortunately, the MLA for North Island is in another meeting, but she wanted to make sure that we all welcome you and your teacher and your chaperones, Mrs. Wilson. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this proceeding.
Recognizing the member for Boundaries, Similkameen.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thanks to the member opposite for the opportunity. I know we share a passion for many things, including agriculture, the natural resource sector, and rural places, so she would probably appreciate the cuts and scrapes and cracked rib that I'm here with today after building a couple kilometers of cattle fencing over the last few days. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity. I just came out of meetings in my constituency with farmers that have been devastated by massive crop losses tied to erratic and unpredictable climates. At the same time, last week I had the honor to represent government at the BC Economic Development Association conference and meet with people across BC that are dedicated to helping communities large and small live up to their potential and thrive in terms of jobs and economic activity. A great deal of that conversation revolved around supporting communities impacted by decades of short-sighted management of our forests. I think these kinds of challenges make it clear that we have a choice here in Victoria. We could continue down this path of supporting individual corporate profit at the heart of why we do what we do here, or we can recognize the limitations of individual self-gain and manage our natural resource system with people and the things they care about at the heart of why we do what we do. If you ran a company, Honourable Speaker, and I asked you to make that successful, you would be right to ask me whether success meant short-term immediate profit or managing for that to be something of value for you to pass on to your grandchildren. Communities like Princeton and Grand Forks in my riding, or Lytton, or Kelowna, or Fraser Valley, or Fort Nelson know all too clearly the massive personal and collective costs of the damage we've done to our climate by short-sighted management. Farmers across the Similkameen and South Okanagan are hurting right now because of erratic weather. We can and will continue to support communities through disasters and recovery and we will continue to find ways to support farmers, such as the $70 million extended replant program for those growers. We'll continue to support those people and places, but I'm tired of British Columbians shouldering the costs of corporate greed, whether that's damage to our environment or the durability of our local and provincial economies. So what else do we need to do? We need to figure out ways to support our natural resource sector so they can continue to exist as a key source of high-quality jobs for generations to come in our communities. This means investing in the private sector through tools like the BC Manufacturing Job Funds, whether that's investing in opportunities like the Herb Proctor Community Forest and their mill upgrades, or last week's announcement of $8 million to Toco's engineered wood program, securing 250 jobs and adding more. It means supporting a $36 billion hydro capital plan that looks towards creating over 10,000 jobs a year, or their 2024 call for power that is expected to deliver 2,000 more new jobs. It means fixing a gunky permitting system and investing $77 million in budget recently to speed up that permitting, showing results already. That means investing in operations like Copper Mountain Mine in my riding to help them reduce their impacts on emissions to produce low-carbon copper that the world wants and needs. This was done with millions of dollars to provide electrification of their haul trucks and their drilling equipment, for example, things that those people are rightly proud of. It means investing in support centers like the ESG Center of Excellence to attract a bigger share of the trillions of dollars of assets under management around the world, looking to be invested into places like BC with sound practices and great natural assets, bringing better ROI to the companies who do this work. It means supporting modernization of our forest sector to put stewardship and sustainability, reconciliation, and community engagement at the heart of what we're doing for generations to come. It means supporting Osisko's mine near the members, in the members riding near Wells, the first to receive its environmental assessment certificate under the new Environmental Assessment Act. They will support 500 people and their families. It means making sure we get the most value out of every tree we cut and the minerals we mine, doing a little more here in BC as opposed to sending our raw materials to others to add value to. It means investing in developing an industrial green strategy. It means a critical minerals strategy that works for our community. It means a critical minerals project advancement office. To all of these things to help lead us into the economy of tomorrow, or creating a regenerative agriculture strategy, or the BC Centre of Agritech Excellence, or a mass timber action plan to do the same for agriculture and forestry. This is the kind of work that we are doing to help support the natural resource sector, not just for today, but for generations to come. The cost of inaction is enormous on our physical and mental health, our people, climatic disasters for our communities. The cost is simply far too great to ignore. We cannot afford to carry on down that path. BC, as the member pointed out, is a global leader in sustainable resource development, and the roots of most of our rural communities are deep in natural resource. British Columbians are proud of a future vision for natural resource sector that helps us all win.
Thank you, member.
For our generation and the next.
Recognizing the member for Cariboo North.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Well, one thing that the Honourable Member opposite failed to talk about in their plans was the Clean BC plan. You know, that plan that the government's put forward that is projected to shrink BC's economy by $28 billion by 2030, which will have an impact on real per capita incomes expected to shrink by $11,000 per household by 2030, or additionally that the Clean BC plan is set to lead to the loss of 200,000 jobs, nearly $3 billion in revenue loss. Look, those are jobs lost in agriculture, those are jobs lost in mining, those are jobs lost in forestry, and the list goes on and on. The member can stand and do victory laps about all of this investments happening, but if results aren't delivered on the ground and people lose their jobs and are not able to take paychecks home and put food on their table, then the government shouldn't be taking a victory lap. It is unacceptable how often rural British Columbia is given the short end of the stick by this government. The affordability crisis affects people across British Columbia, but its impact is particularly severe in rural areas. Red tape, bureaucracy, is continuing to create real-life consequences for workers in rural BC. Consider Peter, a miner currently out of work because a mining permit from Victoria is delayed. Now Peter is struggling to provide for his family and keep the lights on. While similarly, Wendy, a forestry worker that got sent home alongside 400 other workers in the spring due to permit delays. These stories highlight very real-life consequences of bureaucratic delays in this province. There is a disconnect with how Clean BC contributes to job losses, particularly in rural BC. Many British Columbians have deep roots in the natural resource sector and cherish their lives in these parts of the province. They do not want to move to urban centres to search for work. They deserve to have work where they have built their livelihoods and have set down roots. I envision a rural BC where families thrive, the economy flourishes, and communities are supported. That's why it's disheartening to witness the neglect of the natural resource industries and the financial struggles workers in BC are facing.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Vernon Monashee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in this House today to ask all members of this House to support our government's continued efforts to address housing and affordability challenges while we continue to make...
I would just remind the member that this is nonpartisan.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, it's all nonpartisan, just asking everybody's support to support these initiatives and investments to help many more people in need. We know that global inflation and high interest rates have caused financial pressures. I want to let people know that we acknowledge the challenges you're facing, and we are committed to support you all through this. Therefore, we're making historic investments and will continue to find ways to support you. I want to highlight some of the work we've done and are continuing to do so. I want to share how some of these initiatives are helping many people across our province as well as in our community. Under housing, a 3-point housing plan by making the largest investment in BC's history with more than $7 billion over 10 years. So people in this beautiful province can have affordable place they can call home. We now have 10 times more housing units being built or underway right now within the last 6 years compared to the previous 16 years before 2017. BC building $950 million invested in new housing fund in budget 2024. That's in addition to $7 billion. I am excited to share that you can see progress in my community, Vernon and area. Our government has helped to build over 700 affordable supportive housing units, including building 20 affordable homes for seniors in Lumbee, and the second phase at McCullough Court, 48 units for low-income seniors in Vernon, which we opened up, and seniors are living there as we speak. Our government is also building more than 8,000...
I would remind you that this is a nonpartisan part of the morning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am not contraindicating or mentioning any, taken in account, and it's not written to say anything about others. I haven't mentioned any party's name. I haven't mentioned any government. I'm not even
when
mentioning
you say our government.
So we are building more than 8,000 new on-campus student housing units, which include Vernon's first ever student housing in the history. 100 units, including at the Okanagan College, including 44 childcare spaces on campus. And we are seeing hundreds of childcare spaces being brought into Vernon Monashee, includes 3 brand new childcare centers built already, 2 in Vernon, 1 in Coldstream, and 4th one is being built in Lumbee, which is saving a reduction to childcare fees, also saving parents close to $1,000 per child per month. 10-a-day childcare spaces are helping to reduce costs for families and further develop access to high-quality, affordable childcare initiatives. And moms like Emily and many others share how their family is saving approximately $920 per month per child. And jobs, in the face of high interest rates, the slower growth in the world global economy, BC remains strong. As last week's report, we gained 23,400 jobs in April, which is a gain of 93,000 jobs since this time last year. BC's private sector also gained 23,100 jobs in April, which is the largest among provinces. Compared to this time last year, our private sector employment is up by 22,700, the second largest increase among provinces over this period. Our employment rate is now the lowest in country at 5%, down from last month and below the national average of 6.1%. Women's employment is up due to direct investments in childcare, and we are pleased that ICBC also announced that additional $110 rebate to people will be provided to commercial drivers while keeping basic rates low until March 31, 2026. This marks the 6th year in low with no increase. Through BC's manufacturing jobs, we have invested more than $180 million in high-value manufacturing jobs. Last week, Madam Speaker, that the contribution of $8 million will benefit directly my community and our region. $8 million to help Tolko Industries to construct a new facility which will house the new Heffley Creek Engineered Wood Division. And this announcement is welcomed by Mr. Brad Thorlaxon, President and CEO of Tolko Industries Limited, who welcomes this news, and I quote, "Today's announcement is testament to our government's commitment to innovation and forest products industry, and we're thankful for that," end quote. Other affordability measures our government we are taking, ICBC rebates, eliminating the largest tax, MSP premiums, which our people in our province were paying. And we have eliminated that, which is saving hundreds of dollars to families. We acknowledge that's why I stand here today to ask everybody's support. What we're doing is not enough, and we'll continue to do so. So no need to heckle, member. BC Hydro credit. BC Hydro customers have been notified that they are saving money. And BC Family credit. Other big tax, the employer health tax budget cut, which answered the calls to give break to all small and medium-sized businesses by increasing the threshold from $500,000 to $1 million. With this change, 90% of businesses will be exempt from the tax, estimated to save more than $100 million. Rentals credits, which started in 2024. And when people will file their taxes, they will see up to $400 back to their pocket. Climate action tax credit and school breakfast programs, helping students free transit to all kids in BC under 12 years of age. Our government brought back BC Student Access Grant, which was eliminated, and we froze post-secondary tuition fees raised to maximum 2%. And there are so many measures we're taking, and I will be continuing to share some of the measures we're taking, how we can continue to move forward. Member. In my 3 minutes response. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Peace River South.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the applause just before I'm getting up, and it's also appreciate the fact that it's the nonpartisan time, so I guess I won't mention NDP. I'll just mention our government that they're talking about. But I will say that one of the issues and the progress that they can be very, very proud of since 2017 is the fact that we've made British Columbia the most unaffordable place in North America. So if we're going to talk about affordability and what we've done, maybe we should start talking about the facts. Because I know my inbox, I know everybody on this side of the house's inbox is full almost every day from people who are complaining about how unaffordable things are in British Columbia. How the crisis that we talk about, whether it's in the housing crisis, the healthcare crisis, the affordability crisis in general, that's what we continue hearing about. It's unfortunate that the members opposite, I guess, either maybe don't read their emails or want to just ignore them, because I'm sure they're hearing the same things that we are. Oh, I haven't mentioned the NDP, so it's technically not partisan. As the member was heckling earlier, as long as we're talking about facts, it's not partisan. So what I'm talking about, Madam Speaker, is facts. Actually,
Member, Peace River South has the floor.
I don't usually write scripts, unlike members who usually have somebody in the basement on the NDP who read it for them. We actually talk about things that we're hearing from people in our community. So, Madam Speaker, we all know that that British Columbia has become.
That was like 100% partisan.
Well, now I'm being heckled from the member from Maple Ridge Mission. Maple Ridge Mission, who's heckling me, whose job was to lower cell phone bills. I didn't hear that happening either.
Peace River South has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So if we're going to talk about facts, Vancouver is now ranked as the least affordable city in North America. Fact. Rents have gone up over $5,000 a year since 2017. Fact. $400 rebate to help those people. Well, that's a fact. It never happened either. But we have to talk about the fact that the affordability crisis, whether it's housing, whether it's childcare, whether it's anything else, this is hitting people in our communities right across British Columbia in every single corner. The amount of people lining up for food banks now, unprecedented. Food prices at our grocery stores, prices are through the roof, unprecedented. 32 new or increased taxes affecting the affordability crisis that we have here in the province of British Columbia. So the members can talk about trying to get everybody on board with their directive, but they've had 7 years. We have not seen anything that's helped. In fact, Madam Speaker, in almost every time we talk about an issue, it's now a crisis. And all we hear is, yes, there's more to do. There's always more to do if you don't do anything, because then there's always more to do from there, Madam Speaker. So again, if we want to talk about trying to help people, look just last week, Canfor's announcement. Almost 700 jobs are either lost or are now indefinitely lost in communities in rural British Columbia. Those are people who are now going to be at the lineups complaining about the affordability that they are going to be struggling with no supports on the horizon to help those people, Madam Speaker. That is what we're trying to talk about here. Every corner of this province, people are struggling and they need supports. Now, I know, coming from a rural riding myself, I see the impacts very directly when you have small communities and you see the people in the grocery stores, you see the people on the streets that are struggling. You hear those heartfelt stories. Somebody who has maybe a situation where they need a life-saving health services, who can't afford to leave a small community because those supports aren't there for them because they're struggling financially and they have to figure out how they will get to Prince George or to Vancouver, or in some cases now down to the United States if they have cancer. Those are people who are struggling because of the problems in the province of British Columbia. So if we're going to talk about facts, let's get our heads out of the sand and actually talk about how we're going to be helping those people who are struggling, Madam Speaker, because whether it's housing, whether it's the affordability crisis in general, you know, the member before me who brought this forward was trying to tote things in her riding. Fair enough. Maybe we should be seeing it all around the province, because we're not. And this is what's really important, Madam Speaker, is that we actually talk about the facts, that people are struggling and they need supports and they're not getting them. Thank you.
Member recognizing the member for Vernon-Monashee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to the member for his response. And I just want to clarify that I mostly write my own speeches, because when I delivered something, I don't feel like it's me speaking. So I finished my speech at midnight last night. So it may not be perfect, but it certainly wants to highlight a very important topic, and that's why I'm standing here. In addition to what I mentioned, also the another biggest money cost-saving measure we've implemented, which also brings equality and equity, free contraceptive saving money for many more. For example, I got a heartfelt message from Savannah. I quote, "Hey, Harvinder, no idea if you will ever see or read this." It was a message on my social media. But I wanted to say thank you for being a part of progressive team that cares about women's reproductive rights, end quote. She then sent a picture of her prescription slip and wrote, I quote, "Saving $373 really helps me and my family while I get the freedom to choose a path that works best," end quote. We've also increased the minimum wage, tied it with inflation, which was frozen for 10 years. And Future Ready Skills Grant, Madam Speaker, is another way to empower people by providing them choice to choose up to 400 courses and which they can finish within weeks and months so they can have decent paying jobs. Madam Speaker, also BC drivers, as I mentioned, are saving $2,000 on average from ICBC premiums with the rate reduction. Poverty reduction measures, which we finally have the poverty reduction strategy. We're investing in seniors, and we increased the senior supplement for the first time since 1987. And school breakfast programs are helping many families. There is medical travel assistance being provided in rural communities, and coming from rural communities and having to use that, not have any, I know how it feels. And I certainly understand the challenges in forest sector. My family and we worked in there in Mackenzie. 2003, we were had to move to terrace because of the mill closures and job losses, and we moved to terrace and those mills shut down. So that's why the work we're doing, this is not new, the challenges we're facing, but we can work together. Today, as family of four receiving $890 over the course this year will see their payments increase to $1,008 under the family benefit starting in July 2024. Individuals receiving $447 this year will collect $504 a year. So approximately 65% people in BC receive money back through these tax credits. And again, there are two types of taxes, regressive and progressive. And what we're doing, we are taking care of families by cutting family and individual taxes. And Mr. Speaker, we can imagine where would we be if we didn't have these measures in place.
Member.
And I hope House will continue to support these measures.
Thank you, Member. Government House Leader.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I ask that the House consider proceeding with motion number 32, standing in the name of the member for Surrey White Rock.
Members, unanimous consent of the House is required to proceed to motion 32 without disturbing the priorities of the motions preceding it on the order paper. If any member is opposed to leave, I ask that you indicate now. Leave has been granted. Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to move the motion, be it resolved, this House agrees British Columbians deserve better than they have received over the last 7 years of neglect. If there is one thing we can count on from this NDP government, it's that the problems they promised to fix if you're going to get upset, you're going to get upset really in about 2 or 3 minutes, so just hold tight for me if you can. If there's one thing that we can count on from this NDP government, is that the problems they promised to fix have only worsened over the last 7 years. Overpromise and underdeliver. That's what we've seen time and time again. Whether it's the healthcare, cost of living, toxic drugs, childcare, or housing, we continue to see some of the, if not the worst outcomes in the country affecting all British Columbians. The NDP government's failure to address affordability is impacting everyone, with more than half being about $200 away from being unable to pay next month's bills. I know the cost of living crisis is undoubtedly felt hard in my community of Surrey White Rock. In my community of Surrey White Rock, I have learned from local food banks, the Surrey Food Bank, Sources White Rock, so Surrey Food Bank, that they have seen a dramatic increase with families struggling to put food on the table. Under the NDP, grocery costs, well, they've soared 30% since 2017. Food bank usage Scott's gone up 60%, and nearly 200,000 visits were recorded in March 2023 alone. The saddest part of that stat, over 60,000 of those visits, they involve kids. That's the record of this government. In Surrey, the average rent has risen by over $540 a month since 2017, making it increasingly difficult for renters to find affordable housing, while the average price of a home in BC has skyrocketed to over $1 million and $2 million in Vancouver. The NDP has literally taken hope away from future generations. Last year, for the first year since 2012, BC experienced a net interprovincial migration deficit of over 8,000 people. More than 67,000 people left BC, and over 37,000 moved to Alberta, searching for a better life than what this government has been able to deliver in 7 years of power. Now, in my constituency, I've met countless residents that have looked for other provinces in order to raise their families in a more affordable way. Another overpromise and underdeliver. The NDP promised 114,000 affordable homes in 2017. They delivered less than 16,000 units with keys in the door. Have they stopped building these promised affordable homes because the British Columbians now can afford the housing market? No. Since 2017, the NDP has now introduced 32 new and increased taxes. Budget 2024 features the largest inflationary deficit in BC history at a whopping $8 billion, which kids and grandkids will be on the hook for generations to come. Meanwhile, the carbon tax is facing a 23% increase, and none of it will be returned to the people who need it the most. The NDP continues to grow government instead of the economy, creating 4 public sector jobs for every 1 private sector job. So, in math here, that means this government will create 4 government jobs to 1 private sector job. That is the record of this NDP government. And, Mr. Speaker, I think that British Columbians have, to say they've been disappointed would be an understatement by this government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Member for Richmond Queensborough.
Leave for an introduction.
Is leave granted? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like the House to welcome 39 grade 10 students and their teacher, Mr. Croker, from H.A. Canby's secondary school. Hey, everybody. Sorry I couldn't meet you outside. I'll try and meet you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Member for Langley East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And it's an absolute pleasure to rise and speak to the motion brought forward by the member opposite today to talk about the fact that, yes, British Columbians do deserve better, and that's what our government is doing each and every day. And the contrast to what happened with the 16 years with opposition and power, oh, I'm so glad that you finally have that through your head, is really stark. Let's talk about, for instance, education, something that every single family relies on. We have growing communities in British Columbia. We have students that are moving into a community excited to start their educational journey. And we have invested, Honourable Speaker, in that, which is a major contrast to the 12 years that we saw with the BC Liberals, where they closed 197 schools. At the same time, though, the most amazing part of it was while they were closing 197 schools, they were fighting with the teachers to increase class size, and then acted surprised when they lost, leaving school boards, and I remember as chair of the Langley Board of Education at that time, scrambling to clean up the mess. It was atrocious. Virtually freezing education funding and underfunded schools by $100 million that year. The BC Teachers Federation president at the time, Susan Lambert, she was quoted as saying, "This means $100 million in cuts to public schools next year alone." A whole generation of students have grown up in school in larger classes without adequate support, and now we're looking at another 3 years of ongoing cuts and increasing demands on teachers to fill gaps and meet student needs. And it was indeed quite bleak. I remember all the years I was on the board, and that, though, Honourable Speaker, is why over the past 6 years, our government has continued to invest significantly in new and expanded schools in Langley, with more than $239 million to create 1,835 new student seats so far, instead of closing them. That includes a new 12 classroom addition to our Mountain Secondary School, which was just announced. Richard Bulpritt Elementary receiving a 6 classroom modular expansion that'll make space for 150 more students. Northeast Latimer getting a new 555 seat elementary school. Langley Secondary, which got 300 more seats for students. Peter Ewart Middle School, which got 275 more student spaces. And new high school and middle school coming for the Smith neighborhood. And there's more to come. That doesn't just come with school spaces. That also, Honourable Speaker, let's talk about our childcare investments. In my community alone of Langley East, there's been over $45 million in childcare spaces. That means that parents have saved through fee reductions $23,988,702, and total new licensed spaces funded through Childcare BC as of March 2023 was 374. Those types of investments make a difference in communities. That's the type of investment that people deserve. We are doing that each and every day. Doing more for people to build a stronger British Columbia. Let's talk about mental health. You know, as health minister in 2009, the leader of the opposition forced health authorities to absorb $360 million in cuts. Resulted in the reduction of thousands of MRIs, surgeries, cuts to programs, and that was just in the health area. In mental health, we saw a complete defunding of that. The supports just weren't there for people that relied on them. And in our community, our government is investing throughout the province, but what we're seeing where I represent Langley East is, you know, $150,000 for enhanced counselling services for Ishtar. We've seen an $800,000 grant for the Senior Services Society to provide the SHINE program to help seniors access mental health. Langley opened its Foundry Centre in 2022. Vision Quest Recovery and Wagner Hills received funding to boost residential addictions treatment. Langley also received funding for the Community Overdose Crisis Innovation Fund. We saw 15-bed hospice residents open in May 2022, and that's just a little piece of it. So yeah, people deserve better every single day, and that's what our government's doing and will continue to do.
Thank you, member. Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. Well, I rise today to support the motion put forward by my colleague from Surrey White Rock. He pointed out how, for 7 years, the NDP government has failed British Columbians in addressing the cost of living crisis. A cost of living crisis means families and children suffer. And the sad state of childcare in BC after 7 years of mismanagement by this government shows us yet another cornerstone of affordability that they've neglected. Since taking power in 2017, the NDP government has promised affordable, accessible childcare for every family. In fact, the slogan was universal $10 a day daycare. But 7 years later, the reality is starkly different. Since 2019, the number of children in childcare has decreased by 10,600. I have met with and continue to meet with families, parents, grandparents in Kelowna Mission who are feeling the impact of this decline, with too many unable to find suitable childcare options. It's no surprise to hear from my colleague that record amounts of British Columbians are leaving, as how under this government living here only gets tougher. Honourable Speaker, the representative for Children and Youth has highlighted that virtually all BC families struggle to find childcare, especially those with children who have disabilities. Since this government loves to go back in time instead of focusing on today and the future, here's a reminder. In 2019, 46.5% of families reported difficulty finding childcare. In 2023, this soared to just under 60%. Are these worse results that showcase the government's incompetence that they're so proud of? Despite promising $10 a day childcare for everyone, less than 10% of all of the spaces that people have today are available at this rate. It's like winning the lottery. The Early Childhood Educators of BC reported that 75% of children in BC don't have access to a licensed childcare program. In fact, UBC researchers found that only 17 low-income single mothers could access the advertised $10 a day childcare spots after 6 months of attempting to interview eligible participants. It is becoming increasingly evident that this government will say anything, absolutely anything, to grab votes, yet do nothing about it once in power. It's not just in Kelowna that's facing this NDP government's unprecedented childcare and cost of living crisis. The NDP paid the City of Vancouver $33 million for childcare spaces, and even then, the city remains short of 15,000 spaces. Rampant spending and no results continue to be a recurring theme. Meanwhile, in my community of Kelowna Mission, the NDP's lack of investment in childcare infrastructure has left families without access to affordable care, and working families are struggling. Despite its rapid growth, as we heard from the member previous, Langley Township has lost over 600 childcare spaces in the last 4 years, while the child population has increased by 1,000. Honourable Speaker, the numbers don't lie. 64% of young children live in childcare deserts across BC, where there aren't enough spaces to meet demand. The government's failure to deliver on its childcare promises has created a childcare crisis, leaving parents desperate and children without the care that they need. While this government may be happy with its efforts to make life in BC worse, the BC United Caucus is ready, has a track record, and has bold ideas that will deliver real results. Our plans not only make life more affordable for all British Columbians, but also ensure that every family has access to high-quality, affordable childcare. We will build a British Columbia where the recruitment and retention of early childhood educators with better wages and training opportunities is a reality, not just a promise. Where living, working, and playing here is not only for NDP friends and bureaucrats, but for all to afford. Honourable Speaker, the NDP government has neglected families for 7 years, leaving parents in despair and children without adequate care. This government has failed families by promising one thing and delivering another. This pattern of neglect must not continue. Instead, we will commit to building a province where no family is left behind. My community and I are proud to support this motion because, united, we will fix it. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Member for Chilliwack, Kent.
Mr. Speaker, BC is an amazing place to live, but it's not always been easy. Over the last few years, we've kept our economy strong through unprecedented crises like the pandemic, like global inflation, and like climate-related fires, floods, and drought. I spoke with a man named Dale, and he described to me that we have, together, faced such a combination of challenges in the past few years that it seems, quote, "It wouldn't even be believable in a Hollywood blockbuster that we have come out of this on the other side." And we know we aren't quite on the other side, Honourable Speaker. Our economy is still being impacted by global inflation, our communities impacted by the climate events. People we love have been lost to the toxic drug supply. There is so much more to do. When I was chatting with Dale and his wife and shared that we aren't done yet, he said, quote, "Imagine where we'd be if we didn't have this government who cares about people first. It's been impossible, but it's terrifying to think about what would have been abandoned if it was still the other guys," end quote. So, this motion talks about what British Columbians deserve and years of neglect, Honourable Speaker, the opposition's framing of which I disagree with in part. The neglect that the members opposite refer to, I believe they got the time frame wrong. And when I hear from folks about their struggles pre-2017, Honourable Speaker, BC is very clear as to when the neglect and damage occurred. British Columbians do deserve better, though. I agree with that every day. We are all working for the better, for everyone. Continuous quality improvement, continuous growth. We all deserve this. British Columbians deserve a government that is fighting against inflation and rising interest rates by easing everyday costs, by building housing that people can afford and strengthening healthcare, a government that will think outside of the box and mobilize every option available to us to move us forward together, every single day. While some think we should respond by cutting services or leaving people behind or defend for themselves, our government is focused on helping everyone to build a good life here. In this session alone, we've taken significant action to tackle the housing crisis by implementing short-term rental rules, protecting renters and preserving affordable rental housing, introducing property flipping tax, expanding the first-time homebuyers program, fast-tracking the building of more affordable middle-class homes, launching the secondary suite incentive program. We've taken action on healthcare, and this is one of the areas that I hear about, I think, the most in Chilliwack, Kent, and one of the areas that I am so happy to be hearing from people in my community is having a real impact on those people right on the ground. We've taken action to strengthen healthcare by building on BC's 10-year cancer plan, by connecting more people to family doctors and nurse practitioners faster through the new digital platform. And this is one area where we're starting to feel the impact. I know that the need is great, but the action taken by our government has been great as well. And we are starting to feel that we've added over 700 new family doctors in 2023. And in Chilliwack, Kent, we've also had investments like the Chilliwack and Fraser Health Rural Primary Care Centre, which is a great way to access, but most recently, improved access to team-based urgent and primary care in the evenings and on weekends through our Urgent Primary Care Centre. We're seeing the difference that's being made by thinking outside of the box. We're building up and supporting the healthcare workforce and establishing minimum nurse-to-patient ratios. We're strengthening supports that will improve the lives of seniors. We're supporting people on the path to parenthood with access to a first free round of IVF, and that's after we made contraception free. We're increasing access through our partnerships with pharmacists so that people can access the care they need, the help they need for mild ailments. And we took action to lower everyday costs. No increase to ICBC basic rates for 6 years. That is a big deal for people who have been paying ICBC rates for 6 years. And a new $110 rebate for drivers, the BC Family Benefit Bonus, the BC Electricity Affordability Credit, and we're helping to lower costs for small business through a higher employer health tax exemption threshold. We have and continue to work for people, taking action every day on the issues that matter the most, and we're committed to continuing with the hard work ahead. We understand what is at stake. It's not just about repetitive alliterations during question period or trying to differentiate between the options of racing to the bottom of the right. We're investing in people and our communities and in our future together.
Thank you, Member. Member for West Vancouver Capilano.
Mr. Chair, we know that British Columbia is in a housing crisis, and it's only getting worse. It's such a difficult time for people here in British Columbia now, and I don't know who my colleagues on the other side of the House are speaking to, but everyone I talk to, every door you knock on, people are angry. They're mad about what is happening in this province, and they want change. Now, when we're talking about housing, there has been a storm of legislation brought in by this government, but it's all being done in a time leading up to an election. So I'm wondering where this panic and urgency was prior to that for 7 years. And much of that time, the current Premier was the Minister of Housing. So what I call this flurry of NDP housing legislation and whatever they want the plan to be called, it's everything, everywhere, all at once. But I doubt that the NDP will be winning an Academy Award for this. This past week, now, we began to see municipalities reporting on their 6-month progress reports on the housing targets that were imposed on municipalities as part of the NDP's housing plan. We already know that the City of Vancouver is going to come up short, and if you think about that, it has significantly more resources than other municipalities in British Columbia. And resources are really one of the big challenges for municipalities trying to figure out how to make all of this new housing legislation fit together. So in fact, of the first 10 municipalities to meet their targets, only one has, only the City of Victoria. Now, unless this BC government can control interest rates, although we know that they can certainly impact them with their debt, control interest rates, available labor, available land, the housing market, developers' timelines, and all the other factors that impact housing and construction sector, a 6-month plan as an indicator of success towards a larger housing plan makes no sense. And I'm also hearing from developers and realtors is that there is so much confusion about all this new legislation, it has actually put projects on hold. And let's not forget that the NDP plays a role in this as well. One of the biggest complaints that I hear from developers is it takes 2 years to get a BC Hydro approval. So blaming municipalities for a housing crisis and not taking responsibility by this government, who is really causing it, is just simply hypocritical. Now, according to the NDP, when these housing targets were given out, if communities didn't meet these targets within 6 months, the province is going to appoint an independent advisor to help them make progress. And if that doesn't work, the province is just simply going to come in and overrule the municipality with the power to just rezone neighborhoods. But I hope the NDP have hired a lot of independent advisors, because I'm sure that will really speed things up. This is a prime example, Mr. Speaker, of a government that makes policy by news releases and polls and does not consider the impact or the ability for programs to be implemented. I also have to question the lack of focus on affordable housing for families, when at least 60% of these targets is geared towards studio suites and 1 bedrooms. So it's the single families or single parents and the families that I'm hearing from that are having the most challenge in finding housing. And when we talk about a storm of housing policies, I told the minister, we talked about this in the last session, that this was going to be a challenge. We've got municipalities now who are not even accepting applications for permitting or building permits because they're too busy redrafting all of their zoning bylaws to meet the June 2024 requirement for doing that. And there's just simply not enough capacity. We've also seen failures in supportive housing where residents aren't getting, they're being left to fend for themselves without adequate supports and for vulnerable people. But we'll look at the results here, Mr. Speaker, and the results speak for themselves. We have the highest housing costs in all of Canada. We have the worst homelessness in all of Canada. It's up 32% in Vancouver, 62% in Surrey. I mean, this is appalling. So for the members on the other side of the House to say, gee, look, we're doing such a fabulous job, it just simply is not borne out by the facts. This government has utterly failed in the last 7 years on housing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Member for Vancouver Kensington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and talk about the improvements and the investments that British Columbians have seen over the last 7 years, in particular talk about on-the-ground projects that have benefited folks in Vancouver, Kensington. We know in British Columbia we've been facing challenges shared across the country, around the world, in terms of the challenges of coming through COVID-19, the impacts of climate change, wildfires, floods, heat waves, and as well just really impacted by global inflation, high interest rates impacting the cost of living across the board, from groceries to housing. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, our government has been taking steps and action to address affordability, invest in services, and really ensure that British Columbians are well situated for opportunities to be successful in the future. Mr. Speaker, I can speak with some personal experience in terms of the last 7 years. And let's just, before I get into what are the concrete experiences on the ground in Vancouver, Kensington, just in terms of the BC United, what's their record, and what have they stood on, and what are we looking at with the BC United? We know that their track record is to pay for big tax breaks for the top 1%. How did they pay for that, Mr. Speaker? They cut taxes for the top 1%, and everybody else paid. 99% paid for that. Then they cut services, and that fell on British Columbians to pay. We know that everyone knows that MSP, ICBC rates, BC Hydro rates went up. And that is the record, Mr. Speaker, of BC United, and also the leader of the BC Conservatives. And we know that coming out of 16 years of the previous government, that housing prices soared, vacancy rates hit historic lows, and rental rates became unaffordable. That is the legacy, Mr. Speaker, and as well as in education. We had a generation of children go through the education system overcrowded and underfunded classrooms, as well in terms of underfunding in healthcare, making it difficult to access services that British Columbians needed. And so that's the record, Mr. Speaker. And I want to talk at what has our government been doing to address these challenges in British Columbia. We are taking action to address affordability. And we know, for example, all drivers across British Columbia through ICBC will be getting $110 rebate, for example. We have also, to address the housing crisis, brought in a secondary suite grant, $40,000, so homeowners can provide below market rents for a minimum of 5 years. We've implemented a number of initiatives, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about what are folks in Vancouver, Kensington, what do they see, and how do they access services? Well, if they need health care, there's the new Southeast Urgent and Primary Care Centre on Victoria Drive, Mr. Speaker, really expanding that network to access and provide health care. We know that the family physician compensation model to attract and retain family physicians has more than 4,000 physicians signed up, as well as expansion of nurse practitioners. When we look at the issue of affordability and access to education, we have the seismically remodeled Sir Fleming School, which also expanded spaces for childcare, really providing those services. And in terms of housing and providing those services on the ground, we have the new Senior Centre 411, which has a new centre and accompanied by affordable rental housing for seniors, Mr. Speaker. These are what the investments on the ground in Vancouver, Kensington, that people can see, that people can access, that are helping, that are supporting folks in terms of the investments that our government is making every day, not only in Vancouver, Kensington, across our province, Mr. Speaker, as well putting money back in the pockets. I think the clear contrast, the previous government taking money out of the pockets of British Columbians to pay for tax cuts for the top 1%. We are boosting the BC family benefit so that eligible families with kids will receive up to more than $3,500 a year, making childcare more affordable. Families with kids under 5 are saving as much as $900 every month. Our government's taking action, Mr. Speaker, to address affordability, to invest in services, to provide opportunities for British Columbians under times of great challenge, and I'm very proud of that record. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member.
Member for Richmond North Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the past 7 years, we have witnessed a troubling deterioration in public safety across British Columbia. Many families do not feel safe walking down the street due to random violent attacks from repeat offenders, but we didn't get there just overnight. For 5 years, the former Attorney General, now Premier, implemented his soft on crime policy that have seen a 37% increase in violent crimes, while overall crime has surged by nearly 10%. This situation is the direct consequence of the Premier's failed catch and release justice system, which has repeatedly failed to keep violent criminals from reoffending. Additionally, we have seen an alarming 11% rise in youth crime rates over just last year. Under this government, not only are our youth more exposed to addiction thanks to drug diversion under this government's watch, but also crime. These issues have not only persisted, but have worsened significantly. The Premier has had 7 years to address these problems, yet the situation continues to deteriorate. One of the most glaring examples of the Premier's failure to provide safety is reckless decriminalization experiment. For over 15 months, this policy has allowed open drug use to spread chaos throughout BC communities, with the government providing little or zero support for those affected. In my community of Richmond, we have seen firsthand how this government will ignore concerns and then backtrack. When the proposal for a safe consumption site in the hospital was put forward, the community's strong opposition was initially disregarded by this government. In fact, on the day when Richmond City Council discussed the proposed safe consumption site, BC Minister of Health expressed his support for the injection site despite the Premier stating the following day that it did not appear to be immediately needed in Richmond. It wasn't until the government was faced with a petition of more than 22,000 signatures that they began to pay attention. Throughout all of this, I was the only MLA from Richmond present at the City Council meeting, actively listening to and addressing the concern of our community members. Where were the Richmond MLA from that side of the House? Honourable Speaker, through you to my government colleagues from Richmond, your community needed you, and you abandoned them. The announcement on May 7 that BC will be rolling back public drug use further highlights their failures. Nowhere did they accept accountability for the chaos that they have caused, nor have they planned to increase services. Our BC United Caucus is prepared to tackle these challenges. Through our Better is Possible plan, we will build a truly recovery-oriented system of care that prioritizes free treatment over free drugs. We will do this by eliminating user fees at publicly funded addiction treatment beds and providing direct government funding for private beds so that we can ensure no one faces financial barriers. Our commitment to build at least 5 regional recovery communities will offer comprehensive addiction treatment programs where individuals can reside for up to a year, receiving continued support. We will significantly enhance our efforts in prevention and awareness, particularly among youth, so that they are educated on the dangers associated with drug use. While Better is Possible, ensure people have the services they need to get better. Our Safe BC plan will restore safety and security at every community. We will scrap the reckless decriminalization pilot that has led to skyrocketing public drug use. The BC United Caucus will treat all crimes seriously, even minor ones like shoplifting, bike theft and vandalism, and expand community service as a required option for sentencing for minor offenses. Not every offense requires jail time, but all crimes will have consequences for those facing sentences. We propose an innovative approach, offering individuals a choice between traditional incarceration and secure treatment options. This initiative will integrate mental health and addiction services within BC correctional institutions, aiming to treat underlying issues and prevent future offenses. We need big ideas and bold leadership to help get BC back on track, and the leader of the official opposition that, unlike the NDP government's record, after 7 years and no result, it's time to restore accountability in BC justice system and provide compassionate, comprehensive care for those who need it. United will fix it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Member for Parksville-Qualicum.
I seek leave to make an introduction.
Is leave granted? Aye. Please proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. I hope that House will make the grade 5, 6, and 7 students from Aerosmith Independent School feel very welcome, along with their teachers, Leslie Bremner and Michaela Miller. If you could all give them a great welcome.
Welcome. Member for Powell River Sunshine Coast.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and welcome to the students from Up Island. I represent Powell River Sunshine Coast. You can see it from where you live. Today we're talking about a motion that members of the opposition brought forward, saying that government hasn't done enough, or that they've neglected the people of the province, and so they're going back and forth. The opposition says one thing, and the government members reply by saying a lot of the good things that government is doing. And so that's what you're going to be hearing for the next few minutes. And I would take issue with the statements made by almost every speaker. Almost every statement they've made, very negative. It ignores some basic facts. It seems to be not a very useful motion, quite frankly, and I've been here 19 years. I've seen, we've had some good, interesting debates that have actually led to people understanding the system better, but this one just sounds like it's just one big blanket kind of complaint about, well, I think they're hoping to become more relevant by talking just negatively, without any solutions, any suggestions on how things can be done better. Because we have, obviously, everybody knows this, that our government brought in a childcare program that previously had not existed. The previous government, who are now in opposition, did not invest in programs that would allow parents to work outside the home, they did not invest in childcare, which was really something that we as legislators here think was really important. So our government has invested in very high amounts of money into childcare programs all across the province, including in the riding of Powell River Sunshine Coast, and including in Parksville, where many of you probably go. So I would just say quite simply that the complaints that we're hearing without any solutions seem just to be like, yelling into the wind. Really what we need to do is remind people that we've gone through some challenging times, and in fact many places across Canada and other parts of the world are struggling with inflation, so costs go up, struggling with not enough housing because we should have been starting that 20 years ago and nothing really was done. So we're catching up. We're trying to build houses really fast, and we're doing things that are really important now that should have been started a long time ago. And then one of the members talked about the crime in our country, but as you know, because you're grade 5, I think, you know that crime in the criminal code is a federal responsibility, the responsibility of the government in Ottawa. And yeah, we don't like it when people get victimized from crime. And I've had family members who've been victims of crime. And we always want to make sure that we're doing the right things to make sure that people who commit offenses get the help they need so that they don't do it again. And I have to say that, some of the things that we've done to focus on helping people help themselves, I think, is really important. We've increased the number of places for people to go if they're struggling with alcohol or addiction. And that's an important thing to do. We've increased the number of places for people to live, and if they have a place to live, they're more secure and they're more likely to help themselves if they got a place to live. So I think that the members of the opposition could probably be more helpful in providing solutions that are logical and workable, instead of just complaining, but it's partly their job as opposition members to complain about government. So that's what they're doing, and we're responding by saying that we understand that we have a lot of work to do, but we've taken some really, really big steps in terms of building housing, building a child care program, and making sure that supports exist for families. Like we took away some taxes that families had to pay, like the medical services plan. That saved families a lot of money. We've increased the family benefit, and that gives money to families that the province can redistribute. And I think that that's really important to know as young people, that in our system we have people who make the laws, and we have people who challenge government. That's their job, and it's important that they do that job, and it's important that government explain well that the things that they're doing are helpful. So thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Member for Kamloops North Thompson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's interesting, the member opposite must not have his listening ears on today, because we've actually been talking about our plans on Better as Possible, which is addiction and recovery focused treatment. We've mentioned our housing plan, our Safer BC plan, which would actually have consequences to people breaking laws. And what we've heard back from government is 20 years ago, and oh, well, that's the federal government's fault or problem, or oh, actually it's a global problem that's happening right now. No actual acknowledgement of the total disarray that has been created over the last 7 years that this government has been in office. And that is the reality that people are faced with every day. When we look at things like their Clean BC plan, which is really, as we see with the BC review, of a government-commissioned report and findings, it's really a cost to BC plan, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to cost British Columbians. So at a time when we see emissions in BC rising, actually worse than they are across Canada, based on the latest information from the federal government, and because the government, this NDP government, didn't like the result of that reporting, it suddenly became a flawed federal government report, according to this NDP government. Because once again, they don't want to be held accountable for their own lack of action and results on a wide range of issues. When it comes to Clean BC, this is the government, this is the Premier that has insisted that regardless of what happens federally with the price of carbon, BC will go to a $170 carbon tax. At a time when all the other premiers are calling for a minimum of freezing, if not outright removal of carbon tax, this Premier has said it's going to $170. Now that includes NDP premiers, it includes NDP opposition leaders across this country that have recognized that people simply can't afford a tax that's not actually delivering the result it was supposed to do, which is drop emissions. Now the government will say, well, you brought in the tax, and yes, we did when we were BC Liberals back in the day. We brought in the tax. Emissions were actually dropping. It was revenue neutral. And it was capped at $30. This government came into office and they immediately spiked it to $50, all while watching emissions rise. They removed it being revenue neutral. And then they cheerleaded going to $170, and now they insist they will be the only jurisdiction in the country at $170 carbon tax if the rest of the country drops it. BC United's made it very clear. Federal carbon tax drops to zero, BC drops to zero. That's a very clear statement of what would we do different, to the member opposite if he's wondering what we would do different. We'd actually stand up for people and make sure they get treated the same as Atlantic Canada as it relates to the fuel they're heating their homes with, where that has now been exempted from carbon tax federally for the next 3 years. This government, this Premier, refuses to stand up for British Columbians and demand to be treated on an equal footing like the rest of the country is demanding. So back to Cost to BC. It's a plan that this government's own commissioned report very clearly shows by 2030, a $28 billion annual hit to our GDP, driving our economy back to 2013 levels, and costing households $11,000 a year in income. Yes, that's right. It actually shows that incomes will drop by $11,000 a year in their households, hardly making British Columbia affordable for families to live. Another 200,000 or so jobs will be lost, according to the modeling. And the best this government can do is say, oh no, that modeling is not real. We don't believe it. Yeah, it really, you shouldn't look at that. Except they commissioned it. They asked for it. They just didn't like the actual answer. And what the answer actually said was the only way for this government to meet their emissions targets is to shut down the resource sector in British Columbia. We just saw that this weekend up in the north, unfortunately, with the Canfor decision. This government, actually that fits their Clean BC plan. Keep shutting down mills, keep shutting down natural resource to drive down their emissions. And remember, started off by pointing out emissions are actually going up in British Columbia based on the latest data points that we have generated by the federal government. So this government can try to dismiss their own internal reports all they want, but the bottom line, Mr. Speaker, is emissions are going up. People are being taxed out of their grocery list to have to go to food banks now, and this government's not responding. BC United has a very clear plan on how we will respond when it comes to those types of taxations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Nanaimo. Member for Nanaimo North Cowichan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to stand in the House and represent Nanaimo North Cowichan once again. And I empathize with the member opposite who moved the motion because he's a new member here. But in fact, he's been here as a staff member for a longer time. So he should have a memory of how their government in its time privatized services, cut services in order to pay for tax breaks for the most wealthy British Columbians. And the speakers opposite from the opposition should know that 550,000 people have been added to the MSP rolls in the past 3 years. That's hardly a net outflow of people. In the constituency of Nanaimo North Cowichan, over 2,000 supportive housing units have been built. In the entire time in opposition, I spent in opposition in 12 years, a total of 24 shelter beds were built in the riding that I represented. We have brought in rental controls that keep rent to the inflation rate, or a maximum of 2%. The opposition proposed the inflation rate plus 2%, which would have embedded that inflation into rent prices permanently. In childcare, we've invested billions. Just in Nanaimo North Cowichan, there's been $50 million invested. Half of that, $25 million going into facilities, half of that, $25 million going into the pockets of parents, which has liberated parents, particularly women, to participate more fully in the economy. ICBC is a contrast. Rates went up. With us, we're now entering our 6th year of freezing rates, a total of $500 in rebates, and a total of $500 in reduced basic premium policies. In the Nanaimo North Cowichan, the Cowichan Valley, we're building a new high school. I was a school trustee. I spent all my time fighting school closures and cuts to services. I was a custodian in schools, and when our jobs were threatened with privatization, I looked for a tool to organize to defend those jobs. It was the union that I represented. When the cuts meant the areas the custodians were cleaning were going to get bigger, I had to deliver that news to those people. I remember a woman in her 50s crying, not because her workload was increasing, but because she wouldn't be able to clean the desks of the kindergarten and grade 1 students every night. She was worried about the wee ones getting sick. These are people who care about their jobs, and they were treated very poorly by the opposition. We're investing in supporting those people. We're investing in new teacher librarians, which were cut by the previous government. We've frozen tuitions. We've given tuition-free education to all students all people who were in their youth in the care of the province. We got rid of student loan interest rates, or interest on student loans. We've reinstituted grants for students. In the Cowichan Valley, we're building a new hospital. In Nanaimo, the new ICU. Billions have been invested compared to mere millions when the BC Liberals were in power. We have new doctors, over 700 new doctors and over 6,000 new nurses in the last year alone. Most of those doctors have come to our Vancouver Island. That will help people. The community benefit agreement that's building that hospital means that 18% of the workers on that job are Indigenous workers. That's 5 times the provincial average. 9% of those workers are women. That's double the provincial average. That's good for the people I represent. We took big money out of politics, banning union and corporate donations, limiting personal donations. When that government was in power, it was referred to as the Wild West, when anyone could put any amount of money, and that took power away from people. We brought in the Human Rights Commissioner, brought back the Human Rights Commissioner that the previous government had cut. That's important to people. We're putting people first. We saw people be put last in the previous government. We've reduced child poverty by 50%, more than 50%. We've reduced poverty levels overall by more than 45%. Mr. Speaker, this is why we are sitting on this side of the House, because people recognized that by electing us into government, they would have a government that stood with them, that partnered with them, that believed in them, would invest in them, and have the faith that doing that would make our economy thrive, and it is. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the country, we have the highest wage growth, highest minimum wage, we've cut taxes to small businesses. That's why we're sitting here. That's why they're in opposition.
Noting the hour, member.
And I am noting the hour and thanking the Speaker for the privilege of speaking, and I would move adjournment of the debate.
Member, you heard the question to adjourn the debate. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1:30 p.m. today. Oh, sorry, we have to adjourn the motion.
Honourable Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn. I know you're anxious. I hear you. I move that the House do now adjourn.
Member, before I take the vote, I also would like to remind the members that we will be celebrating Freedom of Press Day downstairs in a few minutes. So please, all of you are invited and come and join us. Now on the motion to adjourn the House, all those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned under 1:30 now.